I caught a tremendous fish and held him beside the boat, half out of water with my hook fastened in a corner of his mouth. He didn't fight. He hadn't fought at all. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. Here and there his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper, and its pattern of darker brown was like wallpaper. Shapes like full-blown roses stained and lost through age. He was speckled with barnacles, fine rosettes of lime, and infested with tiny white sea lice. And underneath 2 or 3 rags of green weed hung down. While his gills were breathing in the terrible oxygen, the frightening gills, fresh and crisp with blood that can cut so badly, I thought of the coarse white flesh packed in like feathers, the big bones and the little bones, the dramatic reds and blacks of his shiny entrails, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony. I looked into his eyes, which were far larger than mine, but shallower and yellowed, the irises backed and packed with tarnished tinfoil, seen through the lenses of old scratch isinglass. They shifted a little, but not to return my stare. It was more like the tipping of an object toward the light. I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw, and then I saw, from his lower lip, if you could call it a lip, grim, wet, and weapon-like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line, or 4 and a wire leader, with a swivel still attached, with all their 5 big hooks grown firmly in his mouth. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it. 2 heavier lines and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snap when it broke and he got away. Like metals with their ribbons frayed and wavering, a 5-haired beard of wisdom trailing from his aching jaw. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat, from the pool of bilge where oil had spread a rainbow around the rusted engine, to the baler rusted orange, the sun-cracked thwarts, the oarlocks on the strings, the gunnels, until everything was rainbow, 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 and I let the fish go. Alright, so we had The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop. Okay, so she starts off by saying, I caught a tremendous fish and held him beside the boat, half out of water, with my hook fastened in a corner of his mouth. He didn't fight. He hadn't fought at all. He hung a grunting weight, battered and venerable and homely. So first off, we can say that she uses I in the beginning, so we're assuming that she's the speaker and like maybe she was like taking a trip fishing. And then she just goes on to be really descriptive and kind of like show and like paint a picture of like how she was fishing and like the situation and the setting. And also when she's saying that he didn't fight or he didn't fight at all, we can kind of say that first she was excited to catch a fish, but then when it wasn't like he didn't put up a fight and it wasn't like fun anymore, like she kind of felt conflicted about like her fishing, like maybe like it wasn't as fun as she thought. He had a grunting weight. Oh, I already read that. Oh well. Okay. Here and there his brown skin hung in strips like ancient wallpaper, and its pattern of darker brown was like wallpaper. Shapes like full-blown roses stained and lost through age. He was speckled with barnacles, fine rosettes of lime, and infested with tiny white sea lice, and underneath 2 or 3 rags of green weed hung down. So here she starts using lots of figurative language like similes when she compares the skin to wallpaper, which kind of gives it like an old, just like an old feeling, like it kind of shows you like the texture of it. And then she goes on to again compare to like roses, so are the shapes of it. And then she talks about how he's really old and how she can tell because like he has barnacles all over him and he has like white sea lice, and so obviously like he's not in the best condition. While his gills were breathing in the terrible oxygen, the frightening gills fresh and crisp with blood that can cut so badly, I thought of the coarse white flesh packed in like feathers, the big bones and the little bones, the dramatic reds and blacks of his shiny entrails, and the pink swim bladder like a big peony. So, first we notice that when he says terrible oxygen, that's kind of like contrasting because, you know, oxygen's not terrible because it lets us breathe, so that kind of doesn't make any sense. So obviously there's something else going on. And then she also says like the frightening gills, so we can kind of like infer that his life is not all peaches and cream, like he's going through some stuff. And then she starts using colors. First she talks about how he's like fresh and crisp with blood and he's been cut, so we can also like tell like maybe he's been caught before. and he's been like released, and it's just like he hasn't had the best life, and he's like gnarly. So then she starts comparing his flesh to feathers, like again, like with a simile, talking about his bones. And then this is when he starts using colors. So he starts using, or he says dramatic reds and blacks, and those are like kind of like really like intense colors, and they kind of remind me of like blood or death. And then the pink swim bladder, like a big peony, that's another simile, and that's just kind of the imagery, and pink's like a happy like color. I looked into his eyes, which are far larger than mine, but shallower and yellow. The irises backed and packed with tarnished tinfoil, seen through the lenses of old scratched isinglass. They shifted a little, but not to return my stare. So again, another use of yellow to kind of, that's like very vibrant, kind of like the sun. And then when she's like actually like looking into his eyes, she's kind of like she's like really focusing on the fish and like connecting with him, and like kind of now she's like feeling sympathetic because she's like up close and she can see like his eyes are scratched, and like he won't like look at her, kind of like he's scared, and he's like just not, he's not having it. It was more like the tipping of an object toward the light. I admired his sullen face, the mechanism of his jaw, and then I saw that from his lower lip, if you could call it a lower lip, grim, wet, and weapon-like, hung 5 old pieces of fish line, or 4, and a wire leader with a swivel still attached with all their 5 big hooks. So as soon as she gets like really close to him and she's like looking at him, she starts to kind of admire him, and that he's been through like being caught before and like the pain from that. And then she notices that he has like 5 other like fishing lines like stuck in his lip, and that from like when he's been caught before, and how she's kind of like, oh, like he's been, you know, caught, and that's why he no longer puts up a fight, because he's just been caught so much and he's used to it. But he's always been put back, so that kind of says something. Grimly, firmly, or grown firmly in his mouth. A green line frayed at the end where he broke it. 2 heavier lines and a fine black thread still crimped from the strain and snapped when it broke, and he got away. So again, that's just the imagery of like the color of the fishing lines and like where they were, and kind of like the texture of them, again like from when he like escaped. Like metals with their ribbons frayed and wavering, a 5-haired beard of wisdom trailing from his aching jaw. So I kind of said like the beard of wisdom, that kind of shows that his like he is wise, like he's been through a lot, like, and like being caught, and he knows. So and like his age has brought him wisdom, because he's like been caught a lot and he's been able to survive it all. And then she also repeats aching jaw, kind of just going back to how like he still has the hooks in his mouth, so that kind of still is causing him pain. I stared and stared, and victory filled up the little rented boat from the pool of bilge, where oil had spread a rainbow around the rusted engine, to the bailer rusted orange. The sun cracked thwarts, the oarlocks on the strings, the gunnels, until everything was rainbow, 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 and I let the fish go. So now we kind of saw, when she says victory, we see like the colors equal victory. So when she, like earlier in the poem, when she's describing like the different colors that she sees on the fish, now they're all coming together to form a rainbow. And as soon as she sees the rainbow in the boat, she kind of has like an epiphany, or like a sudden realization that she should like let the fish go so he can continue living. And yeah, so she ends up having like gaining respect for the fish and deciding to let him go.
So we use Soapstone to analyze this poem. First, the speaker is Elizabeth Bishop, and that's pretty clear because she's the author. And she lived in Florida and went fishing a lot, so this is probably based off a personal experience. Then the occasion is a fishing trip that she went on. It's probably in the summertime, and it's probably like warm out, good for fishing, all that. Then the audience is really anyone, but it's probably more geared towards fishermen and people who love fishing and live in a warm climate that's conducive to fishing. The purpose is to describe a fishing trip, but really to understand the life of a fish and see like the environment that they live in and kind of open up your mind to more than just people. The subject is fish mostly, but like the environment and a respect for a fish's life, and the topic, they kind of like focus on fish living underwater and the like barnacles they have to deal with and all the fishermen that like put hooks in their mouths. And then the tone is very peaceful at first. She's just kind of fishing and doesn't really like have any emotions towards it. But then she becomes more inquisitive about the fish's life and becomes sympathetic. So it ends with a triumph for the fish that's being let go back into the water, and she's not really conflicted about harming the fish anymore. So that's it.